Hey, this is Jamie from Stillmeyer Games, and Biddy. Biddy is joining me for a video today, somewhat about our game Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. This video is about games that I recommend, my top 10 games that I would recommend if you enjoy Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, which is a tile drafting, tile placement game of competitive partnership. Basically, you are sitting between two castles that you're building with these tiles, and at the end of the game, you will score the lowest of your two castles. So you're trying to create two quality castles so that you can't just tank one of them and just focus on the other. I'm going to let Biddy go because he has no opinions about this game. And here is Between Two Castles itself. This is the game from Ben Rossett and Matthew O'Malley. And I'm talking about it partially because we recently announced the Between Two Castles expansion, Secrets and Soirees. We'll be doing the pre-order very soon after this, or if you're watching this in the future, this expansion is available. So let's jump right in. I'm going to talk about some of my favorite aspects of Between Two Castles and then basically pick a game that I think accentuates that aspect of the game. And I go off a little bit here into some different categories of just things that I think, games that I think are very similar to Between Two Castles or have a similar feel to it. First, let me start out with some ambassador picks, Stonemaier ambassador picks that didn't quite make the honorable mentions for me. Dream Home, Sushi Go, Alhambra, Quadrapolis, CO2, Fields of Green, Suburbia, and Kingdomino. These aren't honorable mentions, not necessarily because I don't like them. I do enjoy many of these games. A few of them I haven't played, and a few of them that I do really enjoy, but don't necessarily agree that they fully capture the feeling of Between Two Castles. But I can see where ambassadors were coming from for all of these. My honorable mentions, games that I really, really love that I would recommend, but maybe weren't quite there for the comparison, I think, to Between Two Castles, are Bohnanza. Bohnanza came to mind because you have these kind of temporary partnerships you form with people as you're trading with them. Tiny Towns. Tiny Towns has some nice completion benefits that has a similar feeling to Between Two Castles. Spades. Spades is a partnership game, but it is as I recall, it's been a while since I played Spades, but I think Spades is fully a partnership game. It isn't a game like in Between Two Castles where only one of the players is actually going to win. Cartographers. I love Cartographers. I even pulled it off the shelf, but didn't quite for me capture the feeling of Between Two Castles, so I didn't put it on the list. Glen More 2. I also have Glen More 2 over here. Let's get that out. I really love Glen More 2. It is a wonderful tile placement game. But one of the things about Glen More 2 that is really cool, that isn't in Between Two Castles, is that every time you place a tile in Glen More 2, you are activating all adjacent tiles. So you're gaining these bonuses, these big benefits throughout the game, which is very different than Between Two Castles, in which you place a tile and then you, while there are completion benefits for having sets of tiles, for having three of the same type, you aren't actually doing anything with those tiles until you score them at the end of the game. So love the game, but didn't quite see that comparison. And very, very close, obviously, here. I'm walking a fine line. And last, Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is a card drafting game that I do love, but I chose something else in its place for this particular list. Let's jump into the top 10. We start out with Among the Stars. I don't own Among the Stars, and it is also very similar to the honorable mention, or the game that I mentioned earlier, Fields of Green. I played Among the Stars a few times. I've only played Fields of Green once. I thought thematically Between Two Castles was a little more similar to Among the Stars because it is a game about building a space station. And in Between Two Castles, you're building a castle. Among the Stars captures two things that Between Two Castles does. Two big things. One, it's a drafting game. So you're drafting these cards that are essentially tiles, but they are technically cards that you're passing around the table. And in addition to that, you are then placing them to build your space station. And so it's a combination of drafting and tile placement, very similar to Between Two Castles. And it's just very satisfying in Among the Stars to build this amazing space station over the course of the game and to see this variety of things that other people are passing around, the different directions that you're going compared to other players. It's a game that I really do enjoy. I need to play it again, but it's been a while. So that's Among the Stars, my number 10 pick. The game I think that you'll like if you enjoy Between Two Castles. And vice versa. If you enjoy any of these games, you probably enjoy Between Two Castles too. At number 9 is another game that I've only played once, but I really enjoyed it. I thought about it a lot since, and I look forward to playing it again, and that is Big Monster. Big Monster is a very unique tile placement drafting game. So tile placement, it definitely has that, but the drafting itself is really, really unique in that it is a real-time draft. There are pauses in it, but it's a real-time draft, and you can draft to anyone at the table. So you can pass the tiles that you have not selected. You choose a tile, and you pass the tiles that you don't select to any player at the table who doesn't have a stack of tiles in front of them. And that's where it pauses. They don't go ahead and pick another tile from that pile. But there's no direction to it. If you think about that for a second, you're not passing left, you're not passing right, you're passing wherever you want. And there's a really interesting player interaction happening there too, because you can pass to someone who you think doesn't want something. You can pass to someone because maybe they were nice to you. They passed you something that you want. You can pass them something that you think they might want, based on what you can see in their tableau. Just a really, really cool drafting mechanism found in Big Monster. That's my number 9 pick for this list. At number 8, what do we have at number 8? Number 8 is a game that I do own. That is Ganz, Schon, Clever. That's pretty clever. So this is not a drafting game. It's not even a tile placement game, but it does one thing that I think is really, really, is a great comparison to Between Two Castles, which is that similar to Between Two Castles, the game encourages you to have quality in many different categories. And I'm stating that very specifically because there are some games that basically force you into balance. They're games that say you will only score your lowest scoring category. And I don't always love those games because it makes me feel like I can't focus on a few things that I'm having fun doing. Instead, I have to always check back and do this thing in this category that I don't find all that interesting. However, the difference here in Ganz, Schon, Clever, the reason I picked it and that I compared it Between Two Castles, is that in the various scoring categories in this roll and write game, they're all fun. They're all fun to do, and it's good to have access to all of them. So there's these different sections on your board, 5 different sections where you're crossing off numbers or writing numbers. They're all fun. They're all good. It feels good to do any of them, and the game encourages you to do well in all of them, or at least have a little bit of focus on all of them, because the number of foxes you've earned at the end of the game is that number of foxes is multiplied by your lowest score in any category. So if you've really focused a lot on blue, green, and orange, and then you focus a little bit on purple and yellow, the lowest of those will be multiplied by the number of foxes for your final score. So again, it's encouraging quality in the game, quality across all the different 5 mini games in Ganz, Schon, Clever, and it discourages you from completely ignoring any one of them. But it doesn't feel like it's forcing you into balance, which is what I really like here. It still feels good. It's like bonus points. You feel like you're getting bonus points just for putting a little bit of effort into one of these categories that you don't care all that much about. And I think the same parallel applies to Between Two Castles in that you are trying to have 2 quality castles. And the game is discouraging you from tanking any one of those castles because that'll be the castle that you score at the end of the game. So that is Ganz, Schon, Clever at my number 8 on this list. At number 7, I actually had this game, but I forgot to bring it over. 7 Wonders Duel. I love 7 Wonders Duel. It's even higher up on some of my other lists. I didn't do a direct comparison here because it isn't a tile placement game. It doesn't necessarily have the feeling of this, but I wanted to pick a 2-player specific game for this list, for those of you who play mostly 2-player specific games. I think 7 Wonders Duel is a pretty good comparison because it is a drafting game. It is a game where you're drafting cards with another player, and you're building your own tableau that you get to feel really good about. Same thing in Between Two Castles. So you're drafting with another player, up to, really with the expansion, up to 8 or up to 7 other players, total of 8 players, 7 out of the box in the core game. But there are 2-player variants that you can play in the game where you are drafting back and forth and building your own tableau or tableaus, depending on which variant you're playing. So that's 7 Wonders Duel, my number 7. At number 6, I picked Isle of Skye, another tile placement game. And it's just a tile placement game that I just really happen to love. I love the tile selection in Isle of Skye. There's I price you choose in this game where you're choosing a few tiles and letting other players buy them from you. That isn't really in Between Two Castles at all. You're not buying tiles. You're never spending money on tiles at all. But as you build your isle in Isle of Skye, it has a very similar sense of satisfaction. As you're kind of acquiring new scoring bonuses, you're scoring the different categories available in that game, and that feels really good, similar to the scoring in Between Two Castles. So that's Isle of Skye, my number 6 on this list. And number 5 is the one Stillmeyer game that I'm putting on this list. The comparison is very obvious if you know our company, Between Two Cities. Between Two Cities is the first game that introduced this partnership mechanism. The idea that you are working with a player on your right to build something and you are working with a player on your left to build something, but it is a competitive game. Only one player will actually win, and you're only scoring the lowest of those two things. In Between Two Cities, you're building cities instead of castles. But that core mechanism is here. It's a shorter game. There's less to... not to really remember, everything's on a reference card, but there's less variety, I would say, in the tiles in Between Two Cities, but that makes it easier to introduce this concept to new players. So if you're looking for a gateway game before building up to Between Two Castles, I would highly recommend Between Two Cities, and even with the expansion Capitals, it is still very easy to play, very short to play, and very easy to teach. So Between Two Cities is my number 5 pick for a game that I think you'll enjoy if you enjoy Between Two Castles or want to get into the Between Two world of games. What do we have at number 4? Number 4 on this list, we have Bunny Kingdom. Bunny Kingdom is a card drafting game, and it does one thing very specifically that I compare to Between Two Castles, and I just happen to really like Bunny Kingdom, which is when you draft, you're not picking one card, you are picking 2 cards. You're gaining 2 cards. And that is the same thing in Between Two Castles, in which you are drafting 2 tiles. One of those tiles is going to end up in one castle, the other will end up in another castle. They'll end up in different places, unlike in Bunny Kingdom where you get both of those cards. But I just like this twist on drafting, that you're gaining 2 things. It feels really good to get not just one thing, you're getting 2 things. And it makes the decision point more interesting and sometimes more difficult because you might want those cards to combo together. It means there are more cards that are really, really good, and so you're kind of deciding which cards do I not want to give to other players, which are better for me. But just that idea that you're getting 2 cards all at once, similar to the 2 tiles you're gaining in Between Two Castles. I really like that. So that's why I put Bunny Kingdom at number 4 on this list. At number 3, what do we have at number 3? Isle of Cats. I actually almost didn't put this game on this list, as much as I like it. I almost put Glen More 2 in this spot, but I think Isle of Cats belongs more in this spot, partially because the cats that you're placing, these polyomino cats that you're placing in your boat, they don't really do all that much upon placement. There are little things they can gain if you cover up, I believe, the maps on the board. If they cover up the maps, you gain little bonuses. But the comparison is more that you are making little families of cats. You're stringing them together so that they're touching each other. And adjacency often matters quite a bit in the different scoring categories, the different tile types in Between Two Castles. And so I thought that was a good comparison. And in addition to that, Isle of Cats is a drafting game. You're obtaining cards that let you obtain tiles by drafting those cards at the beginning of each round. So it's both it's both a card drafting and a tile placement game with a very similar feel to Between Two Castles. It's a little bit heavier than Between Two Castles, but not by much. This is a very easy game to get to the table, and it's a game that I really, really enjoy. So that's the Isle of Cats at number 3. And number 2, oh man, I forgot to get this game down as well. I had this over here. Let me just go get it and show it to you. Here we go. Of course, we're not going to edit that out. Or maybe we will. I'll see if Joe wants to edit that out. But I'm here with Azul Summer Pavilion, my number 2 pick for Between Two Castles. So this hits a number of different spots. This is a drafting game. It's a unique style of draft where you have a bunch of little tiles in different piles, and you'll choose all tiles of one color from one of those piles and then push the rest from the middle. There's some nuances to that, but that's the basic idea. And so there's drafting, unique drafting. You're gaining these tiles, these tokens, and you're putting them in your tableau. So you're choosing where those tiles need to go in your tableau. So there's tile placement. And also, the one other thing that Azul has that's very similar to Between Two Castles is the completion bonuses. When you complete certain areas in Azul Summer Pavilion, you get a bonus. You get to gain a bonus tile right away. And that feels really, really good. So you're not just working towards scoring at the end of the game. In Castles, you're working towards scoring at the end of the game. That's important. But you're also working towards these little completion bonuses during the game that give you a strong sense of progression and completion. And in both games, they give you that little boost to move you towards even more endgame points. And that feels really good. So I thought this would be really the perfect pick, definitely the perfect Azul to compare to Between Two Castles and Anakin Ludwig. And it's also my favorite Azul, so I thought it would fit here well. So that's number 2, Azul Summer Pavilion. And number 1 is a game that I don't own yet because I have only just backed the fancy deluxe version of the game, and it's an obvious pick for this list. It is Castles of Anakin Ludwig. 2 different games, 2 completely different games, but we kind of we partnered a little bit with Bezier Games. We basically got the intellectual property of Ludwig, of their Madkin Ludwig brand, to use in Between Two Castles, because the design for Between Two Castles was heavily influenced by Castles of Madkin Ludwig. Castles of Madkin Ludwig is an awesome game. It's one of my favorite games. It is a game where you are obtaining tiles through a pricing mechanism. That isn't in Between Two Castles. That part isn't there at all. But I do love I Price You Choose. That mechanism is in Castles of Madkin Ludwig. You're getting these tiles, you're placing them in your castle, and your castle ends up looking crazy and zany and all over the place, very different shapes, similar to Between Two Castles. You place the tiles, castles end up crazy, and there are completion bonuses along the way. Whenever you close off a room, you get a bonus for doing that, an instant bonus. You also get points based on tiles that you're placing. Every time you place a tile, you get points, and it might even impact tiles that you've already placed if you place in the correct area of your castle, adjacent to certain tiles. So there's that sense of completion and satisfaction and progression, and just the feeling in both games of when you look at your castle at the end of the game and kind of tell a story of your castle. There's one room that really shouldn't be next to this other room, but it is, and it tells a story in that way. I think they come together very well, and the two of them really do have very similar mechanisms. So if you like Between Two Castles, I think you'll definitely like Castles of Madkin Ludwig. If you like Castles of Madkin Ludwig, I think you'll also definitely really enjoy Between Two Castles, because they have very similar kind of set completion and scoring mechanisms in both games. We went, I would say, a fairly different direction in the Secrets and Sorrows expansion compared to the expansion for Castles of Madkin Ludwig, but we still were inspired a little bit by it. And also just a small nod to Palace, I believe it's Palace of Madkin Ludwig, which probably should have been on my honorable mentions list. That was one of that provided some of the inspiration for the completion bonuses in Between Two Castles as well. But yeah, that's my number one pick. Super obvious number one pick, Castles of Madkin Ludwig for this list, but I think it does a great comparison, and it happens to be a game that I really, really enjoy. So I'd love to hear your thoughts here. If you love or you enjoy Between Two Castles of Madkin Ludwig, what is a game that you would recommend to someone else if you think they would enjoy that game, and another game that they would enjoy as well? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Yeah, thanks.